Hello everyone, welcome to another very exciting tutorial. Today I'm going to show you how you can utilize the D3 library to create a world map on your page. And previously we had a tutorial on how to use D3 to create like donut charts or pie charts generally. And then in the later tutorial I'm going to show you how you can map those kind of charts or the pie charts or donut charts to specific locations with the data on the map. So let's get started. In D3 library, first thing we need to do is to create an SVG element, and that's like a placeholder that D3 will use to add the visualization data. So last time in the pie chart tutorial, I created an SVG element here. Next time, I'm going to show you how you can completely do everything in JavaScript. So I'm just going to create two constants for width and height of that SVG. So 900 and then const height, I'm just going to say 600. Right? So to be able to create that SVG in the element is we're going to use D3 select, and I'm going to use body element of my HTML, and I'm going to append an SVG. So you can see how easy it is to use these methods on the SVG select element, sorry, D3 select element to create an SVG. And then I'm just going to set the attribute of width to be the width that we've defined over here. And also I'm just going to say attribute height, and I'm just going to set the height that we defined over here, right? Put this in a constant called SVG. Great. So the next thing we need to do, I'm just going to show you some data. So basically, in order to render a world map, you need to have some geographical data, usually in the form of GeoJSON or Topo Json. And I'm going to put the link over here down in the description. This is basically the representation of countries of a world map put in a file called countries 110m JSON. So you can see here you have type Topo JSON, and then in the objects you have countries list, right? That represents all the countries, and then the countries has like a features element that you can use in order to generate your map. So having this in mind, I'm just going to copy this link here. Going back to our code, what I want to do, D3 has this convenience method called D3JSON, and then I can pass the sort of the place where I want to load the data from, right? That's a convenience method on D3 to load JSON files. And it has some other ones. If you want to load CSV, for example, it has D3 CSV and so forth. So now that we have this, this actually returns a promise in the JavaScript sense. So I have to use then, and this is the data that I'm going to get. So D3JSON puts the value that is returned into this data. So now it's pretty simple. What I need to do is basically create a countries constant, and I use Topo Json, and Topo Json is actually another library that I have to use because the format that we have over here in this over here is Topo Json, and D3 doesn't really parse Topo Json, but it really uses GeoJSON, and we need to have like a library that converts that GeoJSON data, uh, sort of Topo JSON data that we have over here to GeoJSON that D3 understands. And that's actually a library that is developed already. I'm just going to put the link to the description, but it's over here. So I'm just going to add in the JavaScript, I'm just going to paste this library, which is actually D3 is topojson v1.min. But obviously we need to include the D3 library as well so that everything works together really well. So if I go to D3, you can go even to the website of D3. So I can go ahead to D3.js, and then here I can basically go inside D3, scroll down a little bit, and you can see that there is a script that you can include in your pages. Since I'm using an online editor, I'm going to add more library here, put it here, and move it up so that it keeps the order of loading these libraries. So we have the actual D3 library, but also we have the Topo JSON as well. So let's save that. So now I can utilize that Topo JSON library here to load our data. So I can simply say Topo JSON dot feature. That's the method you need, and then you pass the data that you get. And as I showed you before, the data really resides in objects countries, right? So going back to our code, I can literally, the second parameter, pass data, objects, and then countries. So if you use this same, you know, file, you need to basically do the same thing as I'm doing over here. Now I have the countries. Now I can go ahead and utilize the D3 to sort of render this. So first things first, I'm going to create a constant called G, and this G will be the grouping of all the path of the countries that I have in my SVG. So I simply just do SVG append, and then I pass the G tag. So I have the G. Now I can say G, let's select all, the path that I want, and then the data that I need is actually in countries dot features. So features, this file is really big, but it has like a features key that represents all the data that we need in order for the D3 to render the countries. So I do G, select all path, data, countries, and then I enter in each of those paths, and then I would just do append my actual path, and then I would say I want to give an attribute for each of those path attribute class. So I just want to give them a class country. I'm just going to type country. And then I would just say attribute D, and then that would be the path, right? So it's very important to understand what basically this is. So I have a D attribute path over here, and I just want to make sure that this path is very important. So what is really this path? This path is basically a geopath that we need to create using D3. So I'm going to go here to the D3 library, and I'm just going to say D3 geo, right? D3 geo is a part of D3 library that creates projections that you need of your map. So if I scroll down a little bit here, you can see different types of projections. So you pass the data, but you need to tell what kind of projection you want to use to visualize that data on your page. So this is, for example, the different types of projections that you can use to put that map on your page. And one of the ones that we're going to use is actually down here, which is very kind of standard, that we're going to use a geo Mercator to create this projection, which is like a flat projections of the map on your page, right? To be able to do that, I'm going to create this path over here that we are going that projection from. And then I'm going to say D3 geopath. But here, I need to sort of create a projection. And that projection is as I said, is a geomercator. So to be able to create that projection, I'm just going to create a constant called projection, and I'm just going to say d3.geomercator, and that's how you define a projection, right? So that's my projection. So I can simply just say projection over here, and now I have a path that will get this data, and using this projection, it will project those on the correct places of the map on the page, right? So I basically did G3, select all path, data, countries, features, and then basically the next thing was to create some multiple path and then enter into those path and then give them a class attribute and then create like a pass the D over here. So now you can see that we already have this amazing map right in our page. Next thing we need to do, obviously we can use this projection to align this a little bit. So I can use the scale. I can say 140. You can see that it scales it down a little bit on our page. And then the next thing I can do is I can actually translate this so that it kind of tries to almost be the center of our SVG. So I'm just going to say translate. I would say width divided by 2, and then I would say height divided by 2, right? You can see that the width and height here looks okay-ish, but we don't need this data over here. So what I can do, instead of translate the projection up, by dividing by 2, I can say 1.4, right? So now that we can actually see our map in the page without that extra. So it doesn't translate all the way up, right? So the next thing I want to do, we already have the map, but it's kind of like we kind of need to like, give some CSS to make it better. So as you know, here in JS, we actually gave it a class country. So I can utilize that. I can say country, and country is just the path, right? I can give it a field of, let's say, EEE. So now you can see that it becomes EEE. Maybe I can do CCC, and then I can give it a stroke of maybe something much higher, like darker. So now you can see that we literally simply have a map in our page really, really quickly. So just to go over it again, what we did, we created an SVG tag appended to the body in our HTML, and then we created a sort of a G element and then loaded the data of the map, got that data, and then created a constant countries by using the Topo Json library. We kind of called the feature method of that, passing the data and specifically the actual point in this data that we need to get the countries data, right? And then we basically, what we did, this is like a typical D3, way of generating stuff. We have this G element that we added to our SVG. We select all the path that will be created and we pass the data that they need. So basically what happens is that we select all the path, we give it the data, but then we enter and create all those paths that we need by passing the append path, create the attribute country, and then we say the D attribute of those paths needs to be this path that we created over here, which is a D3 geopath with a projection. This projection maps the data that we got from the countries to the correct position based on the type of the type of the projection on the map. And then we kind of style this a little bit. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. This does seem a little bit complicated, but if you really enjoy this, you go ahead and read everything about D3 as much as you can and kind of understand how the selectors work when you want to pass data. And D3 literally easily gets the data and generates whatever you want on the page. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please subscribe if you haven't and like this tutorial so that others can use it in YouTube, and I'll see you next time. Enjoy your day and night. Goodbye.